up, everybody, from YouTube today? It is your boy Connor from 72.degrees. And ladies and gentlemen, the Fluffs are back, baby. This deck is going to become one of the most powerful and most underrated decks that is coming off after this ban list. And I'm going to explain in this deck profile exactly why that is. I have made big changes to my deck based off the ban list to maneuver some new decks that are in the meta, like Drytrons right now, especially, and also Eldritch. And also, this deck does really well against the top decks in the meta. And I'm going to explain that why that is right now. So to start it off, of course, the standard. We got 3 dog. Yes, sir. This man's just the extender between my Fluffal plays. Lets me add a Fluffal or Edge of Sabers from deck to hand. Just a legitimate, really good card. Wings. At 3, this is obvious. This card is very fire once it's in the graveyard. All you have to do is be able to banish yourself another Fluffal monster while you control a toy vendor, which is pretty typical in this deck. Draw 1, send the toy vendor to the grave, and draw another. Of course, off the toy vendor's effect, you also get that Fluffal or Edge of Sabers from the deck. Next, we're running 2 bear. So just like my last video, I had these ratios at the same thing. I just think that this is still the correct ratio. Don't really need to see bear all that time, but when you see it, it's very fire. Running 2 dolphin. I believe this is the same ratio from last time. I may have been running this card at 1, but yeah, this card, what I learned, because I actually took this deck to locals this week, went 2 and 3, but played much better this weekend. Fluffal Dolphin, very fire card to use in games, or not games, but in what you call it, turn 3 and 4. The reason I say that is because they're not really expecting Fluffal Dolphin from your hand when you drop that on them. And typically when you're already going to activate wings on the first turn anyway. So by being able to put Dolphin on field, send or reset toy vendor, and also send an Edge of Sabers or a Fluffal monster is absolutely ridiculous. So yeah, Fluffal Dolphin is definitely a card I would put at 2 in here. Just a very fire card you see during turn 3 or 4. Fluffal Penguin. Running this card at 2, I believe I had this card at 3, I may have not. But yeah, you also don't need to see this card all the time. But it is a good card for going first or second. Just lets you generically get it out another Fluffal monster. Very easy to go into Verde Anaconda and nonetheless Dragoon. Also, its effect when it's used for a polymerization is also very fire. Draw 2, discard 1. I mean, that's about enough about that card. Now, this card I have at a 1 of, and I actually have thought about bumping this. By the way, I am running my deck at 42, and I'll explain why after I show the main deck why I'm running at 42. Fluffal Sheep, super fire. This card I actually have typically added with dog more times than not, especially over the weekend, and this card is absolutely ridiculous. I can just special summon it when I control another Fluffal monster, so it's a pretty much free special summon off of dog. Also, I can put dog back in hand to special summon an Edge of Sabers, or excuse me, an Edge of monster from my hand or graveyard, which is absolutely ridiculous. Easy way to go into Verde Anaconda. Owl at 1. I just think that this is a card you don't need to see all that often. But just like Bear, when you do see it, it does come up. Lets you add a polymerization from deck to hand when it's normal summon. You can also pay 500 life points to special summon a Fryfire or to fusion summon a Fryfire monster with its effect, using monsters in your hand or field. Typically, I don't activate that bottom effect, but I mean, Fluffal Owl just later in the game when you need a poly in hand is really good. So this card I bumped to 3, and I absolutely think you need to put Edge of Scythe at 3. The reason I say you put Edge of Scythe at 3 is that no one expects a Fluffal deck to be running a card that lets you palm or use poly during your opponent's turn. Especially if you use this card to go into Cruel Whale, you can pop a card on your opponent's field during their turn, which is absolutely ridiculous. So Edge of Scythe, I definitely think is a must-have 3 of in this deck. This card also has an ability from the graveyard to protect a Fryfire monster when it be destroyed by battle or card effect. So yeah, very good. And then Chain at 3. Don't really need to explain this. I think it's pretty obvious why I have this card at 3. And I'm also running 1 Sabers. You only need to run 1 Sabers. This card is very fire. You typically see it a lot of the times during the duel. I mean, easy way to go into Verde Anaconda. Also lets you easily go into Appaloosa by having the right materials on board. So the reason I'm actually running 42 in the main deck is because I needed to add some room for hand traps. So Ash is at 3 in this deck, and Lancey is at 2. So I'm putting Ash at 3, specifically because there's so many decks right now, especially Drytrons, that just add cards from deck to head all the time, like Benton. I mean, Benton is limited right now, but by ashing their Benton, it makes that Benton even more sufficient in their deck. And although they do have cards like Natasha, I still think Drytrons have a very difficult time when they can't activate Benton. And then I think this is obvious. Don't really need to explain why I'm running Dark Magician and Red Ice B. I run the Gold Rares just because I think they look pretty. But yeah, there we go. All right, so that's going to complete our monster section of the deck. Next up, Toy Vendor at 3. This card, like I said in my previous video about Fluffals, this card, if Fluffals ever become really good, this card will be banned. Lets you discard a card, draw a card. If it's a Fluffal monster, you can special summon it. If not, you have to send it to the grave. Then, if this card is sent from the field to the grave, or excuse me, it's just sent to the graveyard in general, you can actually add a Fluffal or a Edgem Sabers from deck to hand. And all those effects, besides the one on the field, are not once per turn. So every time it's sent to the graveyard during that turn, you also get to add a card. Also, by resetting it, you can also activate it again on field. So yeah, that card's ridiculous. This card's another card that's absolutely ridiculous. Activate 1 card and you can add 2 to hand. Fight for Patchwork lets you add an Edgem monster, excuse me, and a Polymerization from deck to hand. Just a very fire generic card for this deck. Typically, I'm actually adding Scythe a lot, because when I don't see Scythe, I do want it in hand to surprise my opponent a little bit. It also makes them a little bit worried about making some of their plays when they know I have it in hand. Poly at 3. I'm running a Polymerization deck, or I'm running a Fusion deck, so I don't see why you wouldn't ever have this card at 3. Fight for Fusion at 2. You only need 2 of it because you typically see it a lot. You can see it off of Chain, and you can also see it off of Patchwork. So yeah, just putting Fight for Fusion at 2 is a very fire card. And then these are the one of the spells I'm running. So I'm running Foolish Burial Goods at 1. So the reason I'm running Foolish Burial Goods at 1 and not 3 is because Foolish Burial Goods, if I put it at 3, eliminates how many hand traps I can use for the deck. I'm already at 42 and don't really want to exceed that. So having Foolish Burial Goods at 1 is just generically a really good card. Red Ice Fusion at 1, because I only run 1 Dragoon, and typically I won't see it ever during a duel. I mean, it's very hard for me to, especially when I'm running 42. And then also the OG Monster Reborn. Monster Reborn in this deck, I think is a must-have, because Monster Reborn, I mean, like, if my Dragoon gets outed and I activate that, or my Predaplant Verde Anaconda gets outed and I activate that, my opponent can't really do much in response to that. Unless they have Ash in hand, which typically they will probably already activate, because I activate this card later in my main phase. So if they Ash something earlier in my turn and then I drop that on them, there's not really a whole lot they can do. So that's actually going to complete the main deck for us today. I believe this main deck is just really sufficient. It adds up really well together. Okay, so here we go. First off, we're starting off with Dragoon. Yeah, this card right now is like, if I'm not wrong, it's like $75. I mean, I knew it was like $45 when it came out at the time at first, and I understand why it's so expensive right now. I mean, you just read the effect and understand that this card is not very fair, and not a lot of people can play through this card. So yeah, that card is definitely a must-have in this deck. I believe you have a deck generically, any Yu-Gi-Oh deck that can set that up. Just go into Anaconda and set this up. I don't see why you wouldn't run it. Next up, we are running 2 Sabertooth. Sabertooth at 2, because you don't typically need to see 3 of them in your deck, but it does have a very fire effect, especially when you use Edgem Scythe to go into it, because if you use Edgem Scythe and a Fight for Monster on the field to go into it, then you just bring back that Fight for Monster right back. Also, its effect that it can be destroyed by battle or card effect when using 3 materials or more is super fire, because if you haven't activated Fight for Fusion yet, you can send all those 3 materials to the grave for Fight for Sabertooth, and then activate Fusion to go into Wolf, which is super fire. Cruel Will. Oh, excuse me. I don't know what the second one is. There it is. So Cruel Will at 2. This card's very good. Out of the Rise of the Duelist, I love this card a lot. Being able to pop 1 card on my opponent's field and in my field is very good. It sacks my graveyard while it interrupts their play. In some cases, when you have to activate it on itself to activate its effect, You could also send Edge Sight from the grave just to banish it so that it won't be destroyed by its own effect. Pfeiffer Wolf at 1. You don't need this card more than 1, because if you're summoning this, you're trying to end the game right there. So that's why you only run that card at 1. Nightmare Phoenix. So I added this card to my extra deck, and wow, was it a good option. Nightmare Phoenix got me out of a lot of things this weekend, especially Mystic Mine. My opponent only had 1 monster on field, and I had like 2, and I was able to go into this, activate its effect, and pop Mystic Mine, and then being able to resummon Sabers, then go into Dragoon, and my opponent couldn't really do anything from there. So I was, this card was definitely a must-have. In response to that, I also have Unicorn. Unicorn in some cases is also very good to make just because of the fact that Unicorn can shuffle the card back to the deck and doesn't necessarily have to send the card to grave where the opponent may want that card to be. So yeah, that card is also super fire. I don't make it all that often because it's a link 3. But if I have Dragoon on field and still have Perturbate Verde Anaconda on field, which typically doesn't happen, I'll use Perturbate Verde Anaconda and another monster to go into that. Cross Jeep. I use Cross Jeep because I need its fusion summon ability, which is when I fusion summon a monster, I can special summon 1 level 4 lower monster from my graveyard, so that I can go into that. Appaloosa, very fire right now against Appaloosa is very fire right now against dinosaurs, especially. It outs Misk like big time because Misk, it can actually out both of its effects because Appaloosa is not once per turn, and since that since it's a quick effect, Appaloosa can chain that. So yeah, it actually really shuts down dinos. Next up, Tiger and Kraken. I don't know why I didn't include this with the fusions. My bad about that. Tiger lets you pop as many cards on the field for as many fusion materials used for its fusion summon. I don't make Tiger all that often just because I need Edge and Sabers to go into it because that's one of the summoning requirements. But Tiger has definitely has done me a lot. It can actually in some ways out Dragoon, and I'll explain why. So Dragoon's at 4,000 attack points, and you have this card on field. Try to keep Fluffal monsters on field. And the reason I say that is because all Fryfear monsters on the field gain 300 attack for each Fryfear and Fluffal monster on the field. So you use Fryfear Fusion to go into Fryfear Cruelwell. Cruelwell also has an ability where once per turn, you can send a Fryfear card from the extra deck to the grave, and this card gains half the attack points. So the other day, I was playing against a Shed Doll player, in fact, my friend Kevin, who set up Dragoon against me and had already activated that turn. So I used Polymerization to go into Tiger, and then I banished the materials from my graveyard in order to go into Cruelwell. And then from Cruelwell, sent Sabertooth to the graveyard. And this card was already at 3,500 because of its effect. Then it went out to 4,700. Just went battle phase, attacked into it. And then I also had a Fluffal monster on field. I used that and Tiger to go into Perturbate Verde Anaconda. And then nonetheless go into Dragoon. Yeah, Perturbate Verde Anaconda, I do believe you need to pick this up now because this card is going to shoot up in price. Right now, I believe it's at like $32, $33, but you do need to definitely put this card at, pick this card up if you can. And then I'm running Bahamut Shark, and totally awesome to end it for the extra deck. I don't make this play very often, but when I do, my opponent doesn't really expect it, which is really good. Using the Bahamut Shark play to go into totally awesome just really messes with my opponent's timing of their plays and stuff like that. I mean, totally awesome is a super fire card right now, and I definitely think is a card that should be in your extra deck if you can set it up. So yeah, that's going to also complete the extra deck, and finally we're going to go into the side deck. So for the side, Nib at 2. I think this is obvious. I only had 2, so that's why I'm running it at 2. If I had 3, it would be at 3, 100%. I mean, same thing with my Toon deck, right? But anyway, Nib, definitely good against Drytrons. Also good against dinosaurs. So yeah, I think that's definitely a must-have card you need to include there. Also Zodiac as well when they try to set up Arsenal, which is really nice. So Nib at 2. And then I'm also running Ghost Ogre at 2. And the reason I'm running Ghost Ogre at 2 is because of Divine Arsenal. When Divine Arsenal activates its effect to send all other cards on the field to the grave, and you can just activate Ogre from your hand in order to get it off field as well, that actually makes things a lot more difficult because they can't activate Arsenal in response to Ogre since Ogre will already be in the graveyard. So yeah, that card's absolutely ridiculous right now. And honestly, if I had another, it would probably be in here, but I only have 2. Now, this is a card I have 3 of right now, and this is going into my side deck for against Zodiacs. Book of Moon. If you're playing a Zodiac player and a normal summon, all you have to do is if you have it set, activate Book of Moon to put that card face down because then they can't XC summon. And what I'm seeing a lot of Zodiac players do is just make 5, 6. I mean, God, you guys saw the title. You guys saw the print of my Banlist video. Zodiac players can set up like 8 materials under Zeus, which is absolutely ridiculous. So yeah, you need to make sure that they don't get their normal summon off because by doing so, it shuts down their entire engine of what they're trying to do. Gamma, and of course the driver. So I'm running Gamma also based off the fact that when if I win game 1, I'm expecting my opponent to go turn 2 or go first game 2. So this card's a must-have sided, especially if you're playing Drytrons. They don't really expect Gamma to come their way, and when it does, it really messes with their strategy. Called by the Grave at 1. This card, I'm going to argue, should be back at 3. With how good hand traps are right now, I don't see why this card is at 1. I think it's kind of messing up the game a little bit, but I mean, that's my opinion, of course. And then finally, to complete it, Crackdown. Crackdown's super fire right now. In fact, I was able to beat a Numeron player this weekend. In fact, it was YGO Waddles because I cracked down his Zexal. And it wasn't more so that he needed Zexal's effect. It was more so the fact that that by crackdowning his Zexal, he couldn't go into Predator Blade Anaconda and nonetheless go into Dragoon. So because of crackdown, I was actually able to win that duel. I actually beat him 2-0 with this deck. Anyway, furthermore, this deck, I believe, right now is going to do a lot better after this ban list. I know that the one constant concern for some Fluffal players right now is that True King got banned. And honestly, my response to that, don't worry. And the reason I say that is because since no one can run True King right now, this card becomes even that much more powerful. There's so many people running quick plays or quick effects. So Appaloosa being in your extra deck is absolutely fire. Plus, it's not really that expensive right now. It's actually less expensive than some of my cards in my deck. And this card is absolutely ridiculous. Anyway, thank you guys so much for tuning in. I'm hoping to get more content up soon. Thank you guys so much for listening to another Fluffal deck profile. I will see you guys next time here on 72 Degrees.